So that I can actually thumbs up if you can see my screen, and then get started. So today we're going to talk a bit about R in production. Yeah, let's first see what we're going to talk about today. Oh, sorry. So first of all, let's do a little introduction. Who am I? What is the company? Analytic Health. Then we'll talk a bit more about what is production exactly, because yeah, we're talking about this big word, but what does it actually mean? And then we're going to take a look at into the process that we implement as a company. We're going to look at data gathering and data processing, a bit more about logging the processes, about storage, so where we store data, how we then are building our data products like applications and reports. Then we're going to talk a bit about how we deploy these things. So how do we bring these products to our customers? And we'll talk about monitoring. And I will end the presentation with some tips that I want to give you on, yeah, if you want to run such a production process yourself, what you should think about. So a little bit about me, very briefly. I'm Veerle. I'm from the Netherlands, and in 2015 I graduated as a data scientist from Tilburg University. Afterwards, I started working at Eneco as a data scientist, and later at Dr. Reddy's also as a data scientist. And from 2018 onwards, I've been involved in the pharmaceutical industry. Then in 2019, I had something like, okay, I want to do something for my own. So I founded my own business, Highbright, and there I provided data science consultancy. I started working with a lot of companies, but also in the pharmaceutical industry. And during that, I met my current business partner, Greg Mills, with whom I now run Analytic Health as managing director. So what do I do in my daily life related to programming? I make Shiny applications, I program in R, but besides that, I also do a little bit of Vue and Node, so more to the JavaScript side of matters. So Analytic Health, who are we? We are currently a 3-man company. It's me, it's my business partner, Greg, and Jana, head of operations. And what we do is we develop all kinds of data products which give organizations basically the tools they need to deliver value in healthcare. And we do that by delivering basically 2 products. We have Pharmy Analytics, which is a Shiny app, which is more about how we analyze all kind of UK healthcare market data. So for example, what is being prescribed, what are the prices of all the medicines being sold, which shortages do we see in the UK. And with this app, we provide deeper understanding of what is happening in the pharmaceutical market in the United Kingdom. And then recently we launched a new product, which is Pharmy Cloud Data, which is basically our data healthcare data marketplace. And this is basically the place where we bundle all the data that we gather daily related to the pharmaceutical market. We gather that and have it in an application as well, and we provide it as an API. I will tell you more about that later on, what this API then exactly is. But in short, this is who we are. So how are we running a business in R? That's basically the question today that I'm answering. And that all starts with a very important question to begin with. So what is production? Because everybody talks about it. It's like this magic word that is only like applicable for big, large companies. But what is production now really? And this is my view on what production is. Production means that your code is being, for one, used in a real world situation. 2, and people rely upon that code. And 3, if something goes wrong, this has real life impact. So there are these 3 elements, which in my opinion are belonging to what production is. So it's being used, it's being relied upon, and it has real life impact if something goes wrong. And this goes 2 ways. So it's not only about your customers and your users, but it's also about your developers. because your developers also use code, rely upon your code, and it has real life impact if something goes wrong. And also important to note here is that production, according to this definition, is not something that is only applicable when you have thousands of users. It's already applicable when you have one user. I mean, something is in production if even one person relies upon your code to do something. And if something doesn't work and that has real life impact, that's already what production is. So how do we then make sure at our company how people can rely upon our code? And as I said already, we are a three-man company. We are in the startup phase, but no matter how small or how big you are, I think there are a few fundamental points that make what your code should actually be. So, for example, we have these three ground rules that for us are very important, that no matter what we do, these three things need to be there. So, for example, our code should always be available. That means that our customers rely upon our code to do certain stuff. For example, we make applications and people visit those applications on a daily basis. So it needs to be available. But also in those applications, we provide data on which customers make their choices, important business choices. So we also need to make sure that our code is validated. We need to make sure that whatever we are producing or serving to the customer is validated. So we should know that whatever we have as an outcome of a process is validated. And then the last thing that's really important to us is that it's version controlled and monitored, because we just need to know what's going on. Basically, our business is delivering apps and data. So we need to make sure that whatever happens, that we know what's happening. So how does that look like? This is our process, and this process is what I'm going to guide you through this presentation. And it's a very simplified way of what a process visually looks like. So you will see here that we have ETL, namely extract, transform, and load part of the process. Then we have the build process, and then the deploy process, and like this overarching monitoring and logging stuff. So I'm going with you, I'm going through each of these steps in our process. So the first step is then the extract and transform, or the data gathering and the data processing. And just to give you an image of what we're doing here, we have 32 ETL processes running at our company. And these processes are running on a daily basis. They are running on an hourly basis even. And we need to make sure that we keep track of them and that everything works smoothly. So this is basically the size of the pipeline we're talking about. And obviously, how do you keep track of these 32 processes? Because it's not like something that you can do manually anymore. So you have to schedule that somehow. And for scheduling, we use cron. And cron is actually something that you can install yourself. It has a very nice RStudio add-in even, and it makes it very easy for you to schedule certain scripts. It makes use of cron. If you are on Linux, you will know what that is. But it's basically a very simple way to schedule your pipelines. And you can do it via a very nice user interface. It's not difficult at all. It only requires, obviously, that the machine that you're running on needs to be on. So, for example, in our case, that's a server that's always running, and we schedule it on the server. So you have all your jobs scheduled. So what's next then? So all your jobs are basically running on a nice schedule. They're being executed. So how do you know that things are running the way that they are supposed to be running? And that's where logging comes in. And logging is basically a very simple way to print something from your process to a very simple text file that tells you something, okay, this is going on in our process. So you need to make your logs valuable. You need to know something about your process. So what was the execution time? How long did it take for the whole process to run? you need to know about which script was being executed, because normally what our ETL process looks like has like maybe 20 individual R scripts, which are all being tied together, because we like to have like these smaller scripts, which make it more manageable. And if your logs are valuable, you also know where problems did occur in your pipeline if something goes wrong. So we are basically, these 32 ETL processes that we're gathering are basically gathering data all over the UK, but also from our customers, which are in Europe, for example. We gather data, for example, on prescribing, so how many is prescribed at pharmacies in the UK. We gather data on pricing, so what is the prices of drugs, etc. And basically from a lot of data sources, so not only from like databases, but also from APIs, emails, PDFs, text files, everything. That is what our 32 processes do every day. So gather basically the data from all around the internet and get it into R. That's basically what this extract and transform process is about. And then this logging is a very simple step, which is often overlooked by a lot of people, because you can have all these nice things running, but having simple things in there, like a print statement, which at least prints, okay, this is the time right now of the system, print system time, is often overlooked. So simplicity here works very good. So we have all these processes now. We gather and process the data, we schedule it, we log it. So where do we get all the data to? We store it. And for storage, we use different things. Databases for one thing. We have something in AWS, but also in Azure, because we're slowly moving towards Azure in full. We have an Azure file share, and we have bins. And to those bins, I will come back shortly. But these storing mechanisms, these databases, is quite common. I think that as soon as you're growing as a company, you have the need to store your data somewhere. We have millions of rows of data on prescribing. They are huge. So this was basically the first step in our company to set up a database to begin with, because your data needs to go somewhere. And then the thing that we recently added or discovered actually were these pins. So what are these pins? These pins are quite interesting, because a pin, or the pins package, is a package from RStudio. And with pins, you can store any resource that you want in its exact format. So if you have a data table in R, if you have a data frame, if you have a model, you can just shoot it to a pin and you can store it. And you can retrieve it like the way it was, with all its attributes, with the same column format. It's really cool. And it allows you to share these pins or your resources by publishing them to your publishing platform of choice. You can publish them to RStudio Connect, but also to GitHub, S3, Google Cloud, Azure. There are a lot of providers where you can host these pins on. And this is actually as simple as in R saying, okay, pin my whatever it is, give it a board, they call it. So a board is a place where you share your resources like RStudio Connect, and you save it. And it's super fast, and it requires one line of code. And it's actually great to use in Shiny apps, because you can easily retrieve these pins, read it into your app, make some adjustments and shoot it back. It's not really equivalent to a database, as in you need to get the whole pin into your environment, then do any mutations on it, and then get the pin back. So it's not like that you can have concurrent things or processes altering the same pin, because that's going to go wrong. But these pins are a very nice way if you have like these static data sets. So often in Shiny apps, for example, you will see this www folder, which might have assets or whatever, but you also have data folders which might contain static CSV files. And to prevent actually that you need to redeploy your app whenever that static data file changes, you can easily change that with a pin. So that's what we're using for storage. And then we have all this data. So we have it in pins, we have it in databases. So then we need to build something upon it, right? There needs to be a product around all the data. And one thing that we use for that is Plumber. And with Plumber, you can make an API or a REST API. And it's very easy to turn your R code into a REST API. So what is it? Because the term REST API, I'm sure many of you have heard it. It's been thrown around everywhere. So what is it actually? It's, well, REST stands for Representational State Transfer Application Programming Interface. So that's what REST API is. So what does it mean? It's really as simple as, okay, it's a way to retrieve information from the internet. That's as simple as you can put it. And you can put a lot of fancy words around it, but that's what it is. If you go to a website, it's an API. You know, you get data from the website. That's just the API doing its work. And with Plumber, it's actually super easy to turn your R code into an API. And how do you do that? Well, everything you need is basically import the Plumber package. You make a new file, plumber.r. You define some endpoints, which means if you go to, say, analytichealth.co.uk/API, then your endpoint is API. And then you can run it. And that's as simple in our studio as hitting the button, run API, and you get redirected to your interface, which is a Swagger interface, where you can easily say, okay, I want to get this data, and then you get it back. So that's a super easy way to already put your code into production, because this URL, if you host it somewhere, if you deploy it, then people from all over the world can access your R code. So it's a great and easy way to get your R code into production. And our APIs that we are building are used in other products that we develop too. For example, our Shiny apps. Because as I said in the beginning, our main products that we currently have are Shiny apps. And Shiny apps are these interactive web applications, if you don't know Shiny. And it's a great way, an easy way to make really good looking apps. And what I really want to say, a lot of people say, hey, Shiny, that's so awesome for dashboards. Yes, it is, but it can do so much more than dashboards. It's like you can build professional apps with it. It's not like very simple dashboards or demo versions or whatever. I mean, we have a business running on Shiny apps, and they don't even look like Shiny apps. So forget the idea that Shiny is only a dashboard, because it's not true. So yeah, how do we keep these Shiny apps updated then? Well, that can be done by either database connections or the connections to these pins, as I mentioned. Because I think key is here that you need to avoid sourcing all these kind of static assets. So static CSV files, static, yeah, whatever, static Excel files, you name it. You see it happening a lot. And obviously, when we started with the company, we did that too. You know, we all started somewhere. We basically redeployed our app every week, because then there was new data available, right? Luckily, we had found a way to productionize that process. But I think it's key, if you want to have a production grade Shiny applications, that you think about, okay, how is my data going to be into my app, and how do I keep that data updated? Also good to know is that you need to think about, if you're putting a Shiny app into production, what are you going to do with your connections? Because multiple people at the same time want to have access to your app and want to do stuff there. In our case, for example, we have customers from different companies who access our apps. And then they will not see the exact same app even, because each company has their own products of interest. Each company has their own favorites, so to say. So we need to make sure that whatever somebody is doing in the app doesn't affect another user. And that can happen in Shiny, depending on the way how you deploy it. So you need a way to manage the number of users that you allow per session, because that's basically the default thing you see in Shiny. You can spin up an R session, and then you can let multiple users on that same R session, which is great because it's very fast for them to get on it. But then they can also start interacting with each other. And that's exactly not what you want, especially if you have an app that's like tailored for each user. So you need to think about that when you're putting it into production. And also you need to think about your database connections, because it can happen that if you basically have like 10 users trying to access the same database, that is going to go wrong. You know, you need a way to pool all those requests to your database. And a very convenient way in R to do that is with the pool package. By the way, all the packages that I mentioned here will be later at the resources list, so you can look at them all over, but these are my quick tips for packages that might be interesting for you to look at. And the pool package is one of them, because it makes it very easy for you to open a pool with connections. And then the pool package basically will take care of all those concurrent requests that might be coming at it. So good Shiny apps, like not these dashboard demo style Shiny apps, they take months to build. And sometimes in our business as well, we have the need for more lightweight reports, things that we can spin up a bit more quickly. And the other thing that we use for that is our Markdown. And our Markdown, actually this is also like this, I think our Markdown also has like this very bad and dull and stiff reputation, but it's not true, because our Markdown, you can make beautiful interactive reports, and you can, if you host them, even schedule them, so that whenever there is an update on that report, you can send them out with Blastula. And Blastula is a package that helps you to email your reports in a very beautiful HTML way. I'll show you an example later. And it's a great way to basically engage people with what you're doing, because I think a lot of you here, for example, are data scientists. And as data scientists, you build these awesome things, but then you need to get it to the business. And that's often an issue, because people don't understand, or like they don't have time, or it's like very difficult. But if you make a simple report of your data science product in which you clearly lay out the results and send them via an email, or schedule them via an email like every Monday, then it's like this reminder actually to advocate for what you're doing, you know, in your job. So it's a great way to, again, productionize what you're doing into a real product that people can use and act upon. And also in our Markdown, you can incorporate Shiny elements. So that means that you can actually make a little Shiny app of your R Markdown, so that you can, depending on what the user wants, you can change the contents of the report, for example. You can let them pick, for example, the country that they want to view. You can let them pick the particular product they want to have a summary for. You can basically do everything. So it's a very convenient way for communicating the most important changes that you want to have. So we talked about APIs, about Shiny apps, or Markdown. So then the question is, okay, you have built all this great stuff. Where are you going to host it? So how are you going to bring this live to the internet, basically? And also, a good thing to think about is, if you are putting them somewhere on the internet, how are you going to make sure that while you're developing, that customers can actually still use your products while you're developing? You know, you have something that customers are currently actively viewing, like your production, and you have your environment in which you are developing. So it's important to separate your environments, because if you don't, then some things go wrong. And I must say, for a startup, this was in the early stages of the company not a priority. And then sometimes things go wrong. So as soon as you are a bit mature, especially when you are having a new business or your team is growing or whatever, make sure that you invest in separate these environments, at least one for production and for development. And obviously you have like, you can go nuts and you can act like a big company and say, okay, I want the whole OTAP street basically, or that's in Dutch actually, but you can have like development, testing, production, staging, you name it. You can have like a billion different environments. But key, I think the most important is that you separate production from development. And that also depends on the business that you're currently in. So how did we do that? We did it a bit a technical story here, so bear with me. We did it by basically very simply setting up two servers, a development server and a production server. And on the development server, we develop. And there we have RStudio Server Pro, which was, by the way, recently renamed to RStudio Workbench. And we basically develop on here. And this is also the place where our ETL processes run on. And to make that happen and to make sure that they are separated as well, we basically divided the whole share system of the server in two, a dev file system and a live file system. And in the live file system, we schedule our ETL processes with cronr. And in the dev, we develop. And all of that is being version controlled, which was one of the things that we found really important by Git and GitHub. That's what we're using. Then our production server is the one where we have RStudio Connect on. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about what RStudio Connect is later. And on this production server is basically where all our deployed products are. So here we have our Markdown reports, our Shiny apps, our APIs. We can schedule content here. It's awesome. I will also show you in a bit what that looks like, RStudio Connect. And that's basically how we did it. So you don't need to be, because that's what I want to make clear, you don't need to be this very big company like the Fortune 500 company, top-notch, whatever, to have like such a production system in place. You can do it very simply yourself. And as soon as you have like, I mean, resources are limited for us as well as a startup. So you need to make choices. But you can with like, we have two very simple servers on Azure right now. Very simply, very low cost, you can already have like this production grade process in place. So then what is RStudio Connect? What's that all about? Because probably you've heard about it, and it is an enterprise product. It's not an open source product of RStudio. You have to pay for it, unfortunately. But RStudio Connect is a hosting platform for all your R and Python related projects. So on RStudio Connect, you can host things like applications. In the case of R, this is Shiny. You can host documents, which again, in the case of R is our Markdown reports. And you can host your pins here. So this is basically your database that you can use to store all these pins. And you can store your APIs here, which is awesome. And RStudio Connect makes it actually very easy to distribute your products to your users, because you can customize everything in RStudio Connect. You can customize, you can have a custom domain tied to it. I mean, our clients just go to apps.analytichealth.co.uk. I mean, it's very, you can very customize it for your company. So that's very cool. And compared to other things, like our business started on shinyapps.io. Eh? That's where we started. But compared to that, for example, because this runs on your own server, you have a very high level of control and you have a high level of customization, because you know exactly what's happening on your server. And it's a great way to bring your code into production. So I think we might be curious what it's looking like, right? So let's take a look. This is what it looks like. Nothing that's fancy yet. I set up a demo user for this presentation. Obviously, we have way more content than here. I think we have 20, 30 pages of content even. But here you can see RStudio Connect, and you see that we have a little bit of content in here. And for the purpose of demonstrating, I put in here an R Markdown document, an app, an API, a pin, and two of our other apps. So here you will see Farming Analytics, which I talked about in the beginning, and Farming Cloud Data. And this is our API that is actually feeding into Farming Cloud Data, for example. So what does a pin look like? A pin is just a very simple data set So this is basically exactly what you see in your data frame in R, and you shoot it here to RStudio Connect, which serves in this case as a database. But what I really want to show you is one of our reports that we have, which is an R Markdown document. It's called the Drug Tariff Report. And the Drug Tariff Report, basically for every customer that we have, in this case, company X, we generate this report every month. So whenever we have new information about prices, we make a nice report, a nice overview of the top 10 largest absolute price changes, and we send it out as an email to them. So this is the actual R Markdown. The R Markdown is the thing you host on RStudio Connect. And you can do basically everything here. You can do interactive graphs. You can make it look all very pretty. And what you then can do is you can schedule that content. So for example, you can say to RStudio Connect, I want to schedule it like to run every month on maybe the first Monday of the month. And after we rerun this report and basically refresh the data, because behind the scenes, all this data that you're seeing here in this table is being sourced from databases, which gets updated through our ETL processes. And then whenever the new report is generated, we automatically send an email to the people that are subscribed to this content. And what does that email look like then? That email looks like this. So forget like this stuffy, old, boring data science stuff. You can send actually really pretty emails. So this is an email sent with Blastula. You can make your HTML templates as fancy as you want. We kept it quite simple. But basically you can give personalized content here. For example, this will then say the company name, but also with the text, obviously you can have like customized company names. And you can send out a really nice looking report where people then can also see, immediately go to the live report themselves via the link. And this is something that we do for multiple data sets for multiple companies every month. And it's a very nice, convenient way to share your insights. So also, if you're a data scientist in like a larger company and you want to get your colleagues involved in things that you're doing, make such a report that they get in their inbox. It's like, it's a really nice thing to have. So that was what I wanted to show about RStudio Connect. Obviously, there's way more to show, but I don't have the time to do that all in this 45 minutes. But yeah, it's a very nice way to productionize your R code. So back to it, because we're now at the stage
Veerle,
where yeah.
We had already a few questions.
Yeah.
And maybe it's nice to go through them already a little bit. Also already looking at deploying, so the orchestration tool. So there was a first question on what you think about other tools like Airflow to manage your ETL pipelines.
Yeah, I think those are all great tools. I think why we chose, I can only tell you why we chose to go a certain way. We chose because we are still a small business, and RStudio Connect honestly offered like great deals for small businesses. So for us, this was like a resource, a valid way to get our code. And also a little bit more background, me and my business partner are both very R enthusiasts. So for us, we are doing everything in R, you know, our whole, as you saw, our whole ETL process is in R. So it was kind of a logical choice to also go for a solution that was like very, aimed at R. I think with other tools, you can achieve exactly the same, as long as you choose, I guess, a tool which suits your business needs at that point in time. So look at really what you're doing. Is that only coming from R, but is that maybe also coming from Python, from whatever programming language you can think of? And then look for the tool that fits best, but also fits the rest of your pipeline, because it also depends, okay, where do you have maybe your other, where have you stored your data and things like that. So yeah. That's what I can say about it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, Airflow is AWS, of course, and each platform has their own scheduling, and for now it's also independent. That helps. Then there was another question to logging. So you mentioned different packages for different parts, but for logging, you didn't mention a specific package. So someone suggested, what do you think of log for R? I assume that's a package as well.
I don't know the specific package. I think so. I can't really say about that. What we do, and I was touching upon a bit later, is we have developed our own package as well. We call it Health Pack because we're Analytic Health, and we in that package we also have all these kind of functions that make logging easy and standardized across our ETL processes. We chose to do it ourselves because we wanted to have like the output in certain locations, and as we will go over later, we also want to have like in a customized report for us. So that's why we chose it yourself. But whatever works, as long as you log it, as long as you can see what's going on somewhere. And no matter if you do that with simple print statements or package X or package Y or develop your own package, the point is that you're logging. Yeah.
Yeah. And then some part later in the pipeline, of course, you're pushing to production. And the question was, what packages you use to test your code? So you, of course, version control, but how do you test it? So in Python, I know you have PyTest and stuff like that. What equivalent do you have in R?
Yeah, so a couple of our Shiny apps are using the Golem framework, and I can't really go into, that's also a bit of shame, I can't go into too much depth about how you're building Shiny apps and things like that. But with Golem, you're basically making your package, your Shiny app a package. And if you're doing that, you can implement tests there with, for example, the test.dat package. And that makes it very easy to run at least unit tests on your code. And what we then do is when we have a major release, we deploy it to a test version of the app. That's basically a different app that we deploy with a different name that nobody has access to. And there we test it out. And later in the monitoring, I will show you how we test our apps automatically every morning. But I will come to that.
Nice. We're nearly at the end of the questions. The reports, can you also include them on SharePoint? And in this case, SharePoint, I assume, is from the Microsoft Office 365.
I don't know, really. I think it's possible as long as you render the output and then put it somewhere, you can do that with code. I mean, I don't know how specifically how to do that, but
yeah, I also don't exactly know, but maybe it's a bit specific. Okay, thanks. And last one. Considering a free version of RStudio, what steps would I not be able to run directly as you presented? What's the so the added benefits of RStudio Connect basically, and the RStudio that you run for development?
yeah, so I think he means the difference between RStudio Server Pro and RStudio. Well, RStudio Server Pro, for one thing, is installed on a server. And one great advantage of that is that you can have concurrent sessions. So I'm like this data scientist, which is very annoying. But I always have like 6 R sessions open simultaneously, concurrent. Just because I don't have to clean out my environment then every time. But that's one huge advantage of RStudio Server Pro. And you can do a lot of load balancing and set up multiple users and things like that. So me and my business partner both have an account, and some developers of ours have an account. You know, it's like a very nice way to make RStudio available for your organization. But you can, it's just R. So you can also do it in the normal RStudio version. RStudio Server Pro only makes it a bit easier to manage it for multiple people, but that's the difference.
Yeah, and it's basically a server, right? So someone else anywhere on the internet can access it. So it hosts your stuff.
Yeah, it is run on a server. Not everybody can connect to it.
Yeah, okay. You give access rights, of course, and permissions.
Yeah. But RStudio Connect is not open source, so you can't run that if you didn't buy it. But yeah, that's it.
Thanks, great. That's it for now.
Okay, so we have the whole ETL pipeline. We build awesome stuff, and then we deploy it. Okay, so how do we monitor it? Because there's a lot going on. So how do we keep track? Because it was important. One thing we do is waking up with our data pipeline reports. That's something that's coming into our inbox every morning at 8 o'clock, and something we discuss basically every day during our stand-up. And that's a report that keeps track of all those 32 processes and checks, okay, did they run? At which day did they run? Did they have the desired outcome? But also gives us a list, okay, this process is expected to be run in 2 or 3 days. Because for some data, for example, we don't know if it's coming on Monday or on Wednesday. We need to check every day if the data is updated, because yeah, the real life is messy, you know, things don't come as expected always. And for this, we also use our Markdown report with Plastula emailing. And another thing that we have is our server monitor report. This is basically my geeky report that I made because I just like working with servers and things like that. But it's basically our report that shows us how our servers are doing. Are the disks still functioning? Are they not overflowing? And we basically put this in because one time in our existence, we had like this disk that was 95% for RStudio Connect, the server which RStudio Connect runs on. So RStudio Connect wouldn't start anymore because the disk was too full. And like these things you want to know, right? And you want to know them upfront. So that's why we have this monitor report. And also this report checks daily if all our apps are running. For example, Farmly Analytics and Farmly Cloud Data. And how does it do that? It does do that with a thing called Shiny Cannon. And Shiny Cannon is a utility that you can install on Linux, but you can also have it in a package. And it basically allows you to have a recording of your app and replay it every time, and then check if that recording is still working accordingly. It's kind of an R Selenium thingy where you can also record stuff, but this is specifically for Shiny Cannon. And the cool thing is that you can install Shiny Cannon on Linux directly or on any operating system, so it can run on your server. So then you just make a cron job of your Shiny Cannon where you play the recording and then analyze the results later on in R. So that is how we monitor all the stuff. And that's basically the end of our process in like very quickly. I can talk about it for hours, but we need to have a high overview of what's happening. So some of my tips that I would have for you if you are trying to productionize your R code. One thing is version control. That's super important. It's maybe not the first thing you think about when writing code because you just want to write code, but just do it because it's going to save you so much trouble. I mean, we, for example, have like these apps where we made huge changes on, and especially if you have a large Shiny app, then sometimes you mess up a lot of stuff. And if you didn't version control it and you can't go back, then it's like a really pain, I can say, if you mess something up and can't find where the problem is anymore. And that happens in projects that have like 100 files of R code and reactivity and whatever. So version control. Then split up your code. Make sure that you don't have this R script, which is 3,000 lines long. Make sure that you split it up nicely in separate scripts. That's also nice for logging because then you can easily see, okay, this script did run, this script didn't. It's very nice to pipe it like that. Then a tip is if you are repeating yourself a lot, for example, with functions, then make sure that you gather all these functions and these things that you use a lot into a package or something, because there you can document them and you can use it throughout all your ETL processes. And when you update your package, then everything is updated as well. Also, think about a fixed project setup. So all our 32 ETL processes do have this fixed folder structure, so that everybody exactly knows, okay, in this folder, this is happening, and there, this is happening. It keeps a nice overview. Then obviously documentation, because you're not going to remember the code that you wrote 1 year ago, right? So don't document for your colleagues only, but also for yourself. Logging and monitoring, just know what's going on and keep an eye on the process. So if we're starting with the question that we had at the beginning, can you use R in production? I say, yes, you can, because we're running basically our business on R. So I think that's proof that we can run R in production. And obviously this was our setup. This is the way we chose it to, and it's also dependent on obviously our business requirements at this point in time, our resources that we have. Nothing is perfect as well, so I'm sure there are like a billion things we can do better or improve or whatever, but you need to start somewhere. And I think that we're having a very nice process already, and we're just building every day to make it better. And that's it. And if you have any questions, please ask them. And if you like to keep in touch, please connect with me on LinkedIn, and then you can probably see more of my adventures related to R and all the other stuff I'm doing.
Super nice. Thank you, Veerle. Really, really nice. And maybe I have to add also, you're also super busy on LinkedIn with sharing a lot of tips around R. So I think it's always really nice to see you on LinkedIn. We are running a little bit out of time, and I know you're super busy, but would you mind staying a little bit longer for a couple of questions? Because I think the chat is now filling up with a couple of them.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay to answer questions. So please ask.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so there was one question by Anna. She's asking whether there are any suggestions for resources, books, or courses to get started with working with servers.
Ooh, working with servers. I must say I'm the type of person who just does things, and then when something goes wrong, looks it up on Stack Overflow. So I'm not the kind of book person. One site I can definitely recommend for servers, if you're getting into trouble, is Server Vault. That's basically the Stack Overflow only for servers. But yeah, I think whatever tutorial you pick from Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, they have all good documentation. So yeah, you can easily get started with something. And then just do it.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I think you make a really good point there, right? Because a lot of those things, like, it's just about failing and then trying again, and then finding documentation to then fail again. So yeah, I think that's the best way to learn. So we have another question. How are you dealing with the R license and keeping ownership of the apps?
What license exactly would it be? The R license, I think that's maybe the license for our Studio Connect and things like that.
Oh, sorry, it's my it was my question. I think with the license, like the legal license of using R. I know we were building for like a client also like an app, and then we wanted to hand over like the app to the client, but sort of keep like ownership of what we built. But sort of in the licensing, the legal licensing of using R, there's like some that you cannot really like have the ownership about apps when you're building them. So I was wondering how you're dealing with them.
Well, we have how do you call these things? Terms of service, in which we do definitely state that what we're developing is ours. The people, it's not like our apps are also freely accessible. Some of them we develop for specific customers only. So we develop them because they told us to develop them. Then obviously well, the license is at their end. But for the apps we develop and have customers on, then we have terms of service around it, in which we state that what we develop is ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, if you need like to hand over, like that you're sharing, or like that in the end that you hand over the app to the specific client, then the client will really get like the ownership and the control. That's okay.
Yes, that's true.
Thank you.
There was one more question towards the beginning of the session that was asking about data versioning, whether you have or do you have a way to version control your data in the database? Is that something that you have implemented or thought about, or how do you handle this?
Not really. For the most of the things that we're doing, we're just appending data, like new rows, everything. It's not like that we are totally updating the database. And for versioning control, well, maybe that backups fall under that. We have backups running daily of all the stuff. So if a disaster happens, we are not lost. Yeah, but no, versioning control on the table itself, not yet. But that might be a good point. But then again, the version control might be actually the backup, because we can still go back like, I think 14 days or something, on 40 different snapshots basically. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I think we tackled most of the questions in the chat, but if anyone else has any questions still, now is the chance. If you still have any, either unmute yourself or add them to the chat.
I have a question. So did you ever try or give it a try the Shiny server process to deploy your applications, or any comments on that?
What do you mean?
Shiny proxy, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Not the
Shiny
server. Yes.
No, I don't have experience with that.
Okay.
No. So we did use at our at a previous company I worked, we did use Shiny server, which is basically Shiny apps only then on your dedicated server. But that's also basically the same as our Studio Connect. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Maybe it's quite generic, but maybe you have some direct pointers to it, because yeah, so if I'm a researcher and I'm just really used to writing code for myself, how do I even get started thinking about getting something into production? Because right now you've just showed so many points of what could be tackled. So what would you say is the first step towards the right direction? Because it can seem quite overwhelming.
Well, if you have a nice piece of code that you want to productionize, let's say a very simple Shiny app, for example, in which you have made your research results available, whatever, then just start with shinyapps.io. You know, just start with getting a free account on there and publishing it there, and get it out in the world. That's the step that our company started with to begin with. So that's basically, or actually my business partner started that in 2019. He developed a Shiny app and put it on shinyapps.io. And that's where it all started. So you don't have to think like this big with all kinds of servers already, and then these paid products and these enterprise level RStudio things. That's not even necessary. Just start with the free stuff that's available. And also for if you have code that you want to make available through an API, there are a lot of great resources where you can do that. I think there's Veerle for GitHub and things like that. You can freely do everything. So start there, start with the open source, and then later on you can think about, okay, now I'm going to go one step further. That would be my tip.
That's a good one. Thanks, Veerle. If we don't have any questions anymore, then I'd like to thank you. Thank you a lot for taking the time to host the session for us. I think you would deserve like a huge applause, but it's going to be super awkward if I just do it myself. So
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
thank you so much. I think it was incredibly insightful and really inspiring as well. Yeah, just to work against this, you can't put R into production. It's like, yes, it's possible, and you can run a company on this. So I think it was incredibly inspiring, and thank you so much. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you soon again. And
Definitely, yeah.
thank
Enjoy
you.
your evening all, and thanks for being here.
Thanks. Have a good
Thanks.
evening, everyone. And also thanks to all our attendees for joining, and hopefully see you soon. Have a nice summer.
Yeah.
See you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Bye-bye.